The story of Henry Knox and the fortification of Dorchester Heights fundamentally represents the American ideal. Henry Knox is a poor bookseller, but rises through the ranks of the military, promoted for merit and skill rather than social status. Through his exemplary competence, he emerges as a pivotal figure in shaping the foundation of America. This story is a defining moment in history, as it is the first demonstration of the sheer depth of the American will to stand up against tyranny. If this 11-month-long siege was yielded to the British, the confidence in the colonial war effort would not have been nearly as strong, which may have even led to a different outcome for the starry-eyed rebels. This is the story of the blood and sweat spent to prove the American people as a force to be reckoned with, and how none of it would be possible without the leadership of Henry Knox. In the winter of 1775, as the American colonies burned with the fire of revolution, a daring expedition was launched that would change the course of history. Without its success, the colonial forces would not have had nearly as much momentum in the crucial early stages of the war. Knox had built a reputation for himself through his work. He was forced to leave grammar school and become an apprentice to help support his family after the death of his father. He lived in poverty, one of 10 children and one of 4 to survive to adulthood. It seemed that the odds were all stacked against this son of Irish immigrants. However, these circumstances allowed his tremendous fortitude to shine through. His apprenticeship provided him with a priceless opportunity: access to books. Knox developed a tremendous appetite for literature. This initiated his passion for military history, and he was especially interested in the role of artillery. This interest for military affairs inspired him to join the Boston Grenadier Corps in 1772. His commanders, taking note of his leadership skills and eagerness for studying military strategy, saw him quickly rise to first lieutenant of his unit. The experience gained from this will prove to shape the rest of his life. Now the year is 1775, and the Revolutionary War has officially begun. People like young Henry Knox are in high demand. Newly appointed General Washington recognized the potential of this talented youth. Thanks to the daring capture of Fort Ticonderoga by Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys, seizing a cache of British artillery, General Washington had this tremendous asset at his disposal. Knox, still in his early 20s, suggested a bold plan. To break the almost year-long siege of Boston, he could take men up to Fort Ticonderoga, retrieve the weaponry, and drag it over 150 miles back to Boston. Recognizing the implications of mobilizing this arsenal, General George Washington sent Knox to retrieve it. Knox, once passionate about learning military history, and now making it, led the expedition to transport 60 tons of captured artillery from Fort Ticonderoga to Boston. Many perils would await him, and he knew it well. November 16, 1775. Knox leaves with his company of men to march to Fort Ticonderoga and bring back and set the cache of cannons against the British. The journey, estimated to take about 16 days, took 40. Traveling to Fort Ticonderoga was comparatively easy. However, the return journey would feature incredibly harsh weather that would make the task of transporting hundreds of thousands of pounds of artillery over 150 miles by sled and boat seem impossible. While crossing a frozen river, several cannons broke through the ice. Luckily, Knox and his men were able to successfully recover every piece of artillery stolen by the lake, and they continued onward. Through feet of snow they carried on. Henry Knox himself nearly froze to death on this journey, and still, driven by necessity, they carried on. The great Lake George lies between Knox's men and their destination. They must cross by ship. This ship, carrying the artillery across Lake George, nearly sank under the weight of the cannons. But Knox and his men persevered, successfully reaching the other side 32 nerve-wracking miles later. Finally, A grueling 40 days after initially leaving from Boston, Knox and his men returned, their arrival marked by a grand procession of sleds and oxen laden with cannons. John Adams, witnessing the arrival of Knox's noble train of artillery, marveled at the sight of these cannons. Among these are the formidable Big Berthas, which were 11 feet long and 5,000 pounds, requiring 8 horses and sometimes additional oxen to carry. With the arrival of artillery, General Washington devised a bold plan to fortify Dorchester Heights. Under the blanket of night, and hidden further by wrapping straw around the cannon wheels, Washington's plan was set in motion. One by one, every cannon was put in place. The British awoke to find themselves hopelessly disadvantaged, surrounded by artillery on all sides. On St. Patrick's Day, 1776, more than 10,000 British troops, dependents, and loyalists left Boston aboard 120 ships. Boston was finally liberated. Henry Knox's daring expedition and the successful siege of Boston would pave the way for future victories in the struggle for independence, forever etching his name in the annals of American history. This was the first major display of the American will to fight for rights. This spirit is what drove the colonists to rebel, 19th century women and 20th century African Americans to protest, and what inspires the fight for equality in countless today. This was a critical turning point in American history because it is the first tremendous display of the American will for justice.